So in the summer I was looking at cameras just like always, and I found this beautiful 1DS Mark II for 190 euros. I got an idea that I could replace my 5D with this monster of a camera, since I could sell my 5D for 150. So I thought, well, that's a no-brainer. I'm gonna buy this camera. It looked like it was in good physical condition, and it came with 2 new batteries. At first everything seemed fine, and then I started to use the camera. I had some serious battery troubles. I bought this battery later. This didn't come with the camera. So what would happen with the batteries that came with the camera was, it would look fine. I would lock the battery like this. I would turn on the camera. Whenever I rotated the camera to the left, the camera would just die. Obviously there was something wrong with the contacts on the batteries. So eventually, after 1 month of barely ever using this camera, I did some research online, and I took this cover of the battery off and tightened the screws inside and put the battery back in the camera, and then it would work fine. The other battery that came with the camera was completely faulty. It wouldn't even charge. The charger would just blink instantly. So what was supposed to be a camera with 2 new batteries was a camera with 1 shitty battery and 1 faulty one. So obviously I wasn't happy about that. My reasonings for so-called upgrading to this camera were the couple more megapixels, 17 versus 13 on the classic, slightly faster burst rate, which I never even needed. The resolution on the classic is fine, really. 13 megapixels is more than enough. Obviously this camera is fine, like there's nothing wrong with it, but it just doesn't have the magic that the 5D Classic has. Something about the files, they just don't look as nice. Also, being super heavy, I often just left it at home and took a lighter camera with me. I've seen some people complain about the navigation and the menus, but I think those are totally fine on this camera. It's super easy. I mostly used the Sigma 90mm and the EF 40mm on this camera, but I sold the 40mm and now I have the 50mm on my 20D here. If you want something more like the 5D Classic, but don't want to spend almost 200 bucks on the camera, you can always get something like the 20D or 30D, and the output is really similar with these cameras, and they feel exactly the same in your hand as the 5D. There were other things that the 5D did better, in my opinion, than the 1DS2. I think on this camera the auto white balance is too cool sometimes, so I prefer the warmer tones like the 5D. If you get this camera, just know that you can't update the firmware unless you have an old Mac with Firewire. I also think that the metering on this camera is slightly less accurate than the 5Ds. If you want to use vintage glass on this body, often with many adapters, when you try to take a picture, it will give you an error 21. Something about lens connections. It's because the camera is trying to communicate with the lens, but it's not getting any response because it's a manual adapter with no electronics. Let's act like this is a vintage lens. So you would mount the lens, just slightly rotate anti-clockwise. You would be able to take pictures again. But the problem with that is you're always scared that your lens is gonna come off when it's not completely secured. So that was my 1DS2 video. If you liked the video, give it a like, and next I'm gonna show some sample pictures. Thanks for watching.